ألم تروا أن الله سخر لكم ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وأسبغ عليكم نعمه ظاهرة وباطنة. Do you not see that Allah has subjected for you whatever is in the heavens and whatever is in the earth, and He has completed His blessings upon you, both the outward and the inward? This verse speaks about two dimensions of divine favor, the visible and the hidden, the outer and the inner. But what exactly are these blessings? In this video, we will explore a series of narrations from the Prophet, Imam Ali, and the later Imams, each explaining what is meant by the outward and inward blessings. We will then conclude with a deeper discussion on the final narration, which connects these two blessings to one of the most profound theological ideas in Twelver Shiism. Let's begin. In our first narration, Ibn Abbas asks the Prophet regarding this verse, who explains, "O Ibn Abbas, as for what is outward, it is Islam, the perfection of your form, and what God has poured upon you of provision. And as for what is inward, it is His covering of the evils of your deeds and His not exposing you for them." This hadith reminds us that while some blessings are visible and easily recognized, our faith, health, and sustenance, others are inward and hidden, like God's mercy and His veil over our faults. In our second narration, Imam Ali described the two blessings in similar terms. He said, "The outward blessing is Islam and what He has bestowed upon you of provision. And the inward blessing is what God has covered of the evils of your deeds and not expose." The Imam essentially echoed what the Prophet had said. In the third narration, Imam al-Baqir explains the meaning of this verse. He says, "As for the outward blessing, it is the Prophet, and what he brought of the knowledge of God, mighty and majestic, and of His oneness. And as for the inward blessing, it is our walaya, the al-Bayt, and the bond of love toward us. By God, there are people who have truly believed in both the outward and inward blessings, and there are others who have believed in the outward, but not in the inward." This narration is noteworthy because it builds upon what was said earlier. It keeps the outward blessing rooted in Islam, in divine knowledge, and in Tawheed. But it also names the Prophet himself as the visible expression of that blessing. Then for the inward blessing, Imam al-Baqir introduces something deeper, the walaya of the al-Bayt, the inner covenant of love and loyalty. He concludes with sorrow, saying that while some have embraced both the outer and inner truths of faith, many have accepted only the outward form and missed its hidden reality. Let us now talk about our fourth and arguably the most well-known narration on this topic. According to this report, Imam al-Kazim explained that the outward blessing is the manifest Imam and the inward blessing is the hidden Imam. The narrator then asked the Imam, "Will there be hidden Imams?" To which the Imam gave a detailed reply, "Yes, his person will be hidden from the sights of the people, but the remembrance of him will not be absent from the hearts of the believers. He is the 12th from among us. God will make easy for him every difficult matter, will subdue for him every hardship, will bring forth for him the treasures of the earth, will make near to him every distant thing, will destroy through him every arrogant tyrant, and will annihilate by his hand every rebellious devil. That is the son of the chief of the bondmaids, the one whose birth will be concealed from the people, and it will not be permissible for them to name him until God, mighty and majestic, manifests him. Then he will fill the earth through him with equity and justice, just as it had been filled with oppression and injustice." This final narration explicitly links the Quranic verse to what we now consider to be the very foundation of Twelver Shia doctrine. So how do we view this narration? In our opinion, there are multiple talking points. We can assign one of three possibilities to this narration. Number one, the narration communicates to us the words of the Imam. Number two, it does not represent the words of the Imam. Number three, something in between 1 and 2. Let us discuss each of these possibilities in detail. The narration as the actual words of the Imam. There are several reasons why this narration may indeed be accepted as the true words of the Imam. First, the chain of narrators. This report boasts an impeccable chain of transmission by the commonly accepted standards of hadith scholarship. Each of the 5 narrators in the chain is described as a man of the highest degree of trustworthiness. As we know, the strength of the chain is one of the primary criteria by which hadith scholars assess authenticity. In his seminal work, Mu'jam al-Ahadith al-Mu'tabara, Ayatollah Asif Mohsini, one of the greatest contemporary hadith scholars and a true reformist of our time, rigorously evaluated all available reports about the 12th Imam in the occultation. Out of the dozens, if not hundreds of narrations that explicitly connect the promised Mahdi, the concept of occultation, and the 12th Imam, he selected only 4 as being truly reliable. And this narration, the one we are discussing here, is one of those 4. Number 2, progressive teaching. Among the commonly understood realities of Twelver Shiism belief is the progressive nature in which the true essence of Islam was revealed to humanity. The doctrine held by the Twelvers today is, in essence, the very same truth that was first revealed to the heart of the Prophet, preserved in the Quran, and understood by the most loyal servants of God. However, divine wisdom dictated that certain truths be withheld from the public until the community was ready, until hearts had matured and intellects had grown capable of grasping deeper realities. For this reason, the Imams, the inheritors of prophetic knowledge, revealed these truths gradually, according to the readiness of their followers. In this light, we can witness a beautiful evolution in the explanation of this verse. It was first introduced by the Prophet and Imam Ali in its outer, universal sense, elaborated by Imam al-Baqir with its spiritual dimension of walaya, and finally unveiled with its innermost essence by Imam al-Kazim, connecting divine words to the divine promise. Number 3, al-Mahdawiyya, past and present. This discussion is in reality a subset of the previous point, but we are presenting it under its own heading due to its potential significance. The issue of the promised Mahdi was known even among the earliest generations of Muslims. This is evident from the early fitna surrounding Ibn al-Hanafiyyah, and later from the sharp divisions that arose among the Shia after the death of Imam al-Kazim. A whole segment of his followers claimed that Imamah had ended with him, while others went further, believing that Imam al-Kazim himself was the awaited Mahdi who would one day return. It is quite plausible that the Imam, foreseeing this confusion, sought to clarify the true identity of the Mahdi. Thus he unveiled this deeper layer of meaning in the Quranic verse and explicitly mentioned the promised Savior as none other than the 12th Imam. Taken together, these 3 points form a strong case that this narration indeed reflects the true words of the 8th Imam. Let us now turn to the second possibility. This narration does not represent the words of the Imam. Before we address this second opinion, let us first talk about the elephant in the room. Some might ask, if this narration has a very strong chain of transmission, why are we even considering the possibility that it could be false? Our response is that the chain of transmission is only one of many tools that hadith scholars use to assess a narration's value. It is not by itself a guarantee of authenticity or reliability. There are several reasons for this, some well known to scholars, others less discussed, yet equally significant in our opinion. Let us pause briefly and clarify our view on this matter. Contrary to popular understanding, a narration may possess an excellent chain of transmission, and yet its content may still be rejected in its entirety. Here are a few reasons why. Number 1, fabricated chains. It is entirely possible for an author to fabricate a chain, listing respected transmitters by name, to give a false air of legitimacy. The chain may appear sound, but in reality it has no bearing on the truth of the narration. Number 2, human fallibility. A person being judged trustworthy does not make them infallible. Even the most reliable transmitters can make mistakes in memory or understanding. Number 3, hyperbole and bias. Trustworthy individuals are not immune to exaggeration or narrative bias. When a group of transmitters all share the same conviction, they may consciously or subconsciously embellish events to reinforce what they already believe. This effect can amplify as more people appear in the chain, all echoing the same worldview. Number 4, conflict with established fact. Sometimes the content of a narration directly clashes with known history or established reality. In such cases, one may reject the content regardless of how strong the chain appears. Number 5. Solitary reports, akhbar ahad, a narration that stands alone, without corroborating reports, may have limited or no probative value in matters of doctrine or belief, even if its chain is technically reliable. In summary, a flawless chain can lend weight to a narration, but it does not make it sacred truth. The value of a narration is not judged by a single measure. It lies in balancing the reliability of transmitters with the coherence of the text and its harmony with other narrations, reason, history, and revelation. Hadith study itself is not an exact science, but a probabilistic and interpretive discipline, shaped by judgment, context, and human understanding. Even the most rigorous scholars work within degrees of probability, which is why two equally qualified experts may reach opposite verdicts on the same report. With this understanding, let us now examine the second possibility, that this narration, despite its strong chain, may not reflect the actual words of the Imam. Here are some arguments that may be presented in support of this claim. Number 1. The rarity of the narration. The earliest known source of this narration is al-Sheikh al-Suduk's work, Kamal ad-Din wa Tamam an-Nirma. This text had a specific goal of defending the doctrine of occultation and contains content which is not found in earlier, more foundational works such al-Quilaini's Kitab al-Kafi. The hadith in question is one such example. Not only that, al-Suduk himself makes an interesting comment regarding the rarity of the narration in Kamal ad-Din. Immediately after quoting the hadith, he states, لم أسمع هذا الحديث إلا من أحمد بن زياد ابن جعفر الهمداني رضي الله عنه بهمدان عند منصرفي من حج بيت الله الحرام وكان رجلا ثقة دينا فاضلا رحمة الله عليه ورضوانه. I did not hear this hadith from anyone except Ahmad ibn Ziyad ibn Jafar al-Hamdani, may God be pleased with him, in Hamdan when I was returning from the pilgrimage to the sacred house of God. He was a trustworthy, religious, and virtuous man. May God's mercy and pleasure be upon him. We do not dismiss a report merely because it is rare, yet narrations with limited circulation are naturally more difficult to accept than those transmitted widely, particularly in matters of great importance, such as core beliefs. Number 2, the tone and progression of the narration. This point is subtle but significant. The report begins with a simple explanation of the verse and a natural follow-up about the existence of a hidden imam. However, the narration then shifts abruptly into a detailed description of the Mahdi's future mission, topics the questioner did not ask about and which do not directly address the nature of the Ghaiba itself. While these themes may be theologically related, the sudden change in tone and subject matter is notable and, in our view, worth reflecting upon. Number 3. Decentralizing Tawheed. Earlier, we noted how this narration appears to shift away from the broader, Islam-centered explanations of the verse. This shift may also be viewed from another angle. Unlike other interpretations, this report omits any direct reference to Tawheed, the blessing of Islam, or the Prophet, focusing instead on Imama. For those familiar with the Imam's established teaching method, this absence is noteworthy. The Imams consistently grounded their guidance in the core of religion. They never considered their wilaya independent from Tawheed and prophethood. They always situated their authority within the prophetic and divine order. A further point is that the Imams often echoed and reinforced the teachings of the Prophet and Imam Ali. In this narration, however, the answer does not make an explicit connection to those earlier explanations and may even appear to move past them. Even if one maintains that the Imams serve as elaborators of the Prophet's words, such elaboration would typically come after mentioning or alluding to the foundational prophetic teaching. This reflects their consistent effort to honor the Prophet and anchor their own guidance within his legacy. The lack of such linkage here is therefore somewhat unusual and, in our view, worth noting as part of the broader assessment of this report. In light of these observations, it becomes reasonable to consider the possibility that the narration, as it has reached us, may not reflect the original words of the Imam. And it is within this framework that we present a third possibility, that the narration does indeed preserve the words of the Imam, but only in part. One may theorize that the first part of the narration is authentic, while the second half represents a later addition. For instance, The Imam may indeed have explained the apparent and hidden blessings as the apparent and hidden Imam, but the subsequent questions and eschatological responses could reflect later insertions, perhaps meant to strengthen the case for the 12th Imam in his occultation. This kind of evolution within narrations is not uncommon, and likely occurs far more often than many Muslims would comfortably acknowledge. There are several mechanisms through which such developments may take place. We note a few here. Number 1. Authorial interpretation. In some cases, the original compiler may include his personal reflections or explanatory comments alongside the transmitted words of the Imam. Over time, later scribes, especially when copying large manuscripts, might mistakenly incorporate these authorial remarks into the main body of the narration itself. This could occur unintentionally, particularly given that copyists were often performing a technical task without deep familiarity with the content. In pre-printing eras, such errors were not merely possible, but structurally likely. Number 2, deliberate additions. It is possible and fairly easy for a later compiler to deliberately insert content in a narrated text and attribute it to the Imam. This form of tampering is especially easy when the added content appears at the end of a narration, as it avoids altering the established core while allowing new doctrinal elements to be woven in with minimal disruption. Such insertions may have been intended to reinforce emerging theological positions or to align older material with later doctrinal frameworks. Number 3, natural evolution through memory and oral transmission. A third mechanism is the gradual evolution of a narration through the normal processes of memory and oral transmission. Before reports were written down, narrators often conveyed the meaning of what they heard rather than the exact wording. Over time, this can lead to paraphrasing, the blending of related themes, or the addition of clarifying phrases that a narrator believed were implied. Separate statements may be merged, and later doctrinal understandings can unintentionally shape how earlier teachings are recalled. None of this requires deliberate tampering. It is simply how oral cultures transmit and reconstruct information. A narration may therefore preserve the core message of the Imam while containing later expansions that reflect how subsequent transmitters understood, remembered, or contextualized his words. At this point, one may argue that even if the second part of the narration were considered a later addition, the first part alone, the interpretation of the apparent and hidden blessings as the manifest and concealed Imam, still provides sufficient proof for the existence of the 12th Imam and his occultation. However, we would disagree with this conclusion. The first part of the narration, while containing terminology compatible with later Imami doctrine, is far too general to serve as direct evidence for the specific claim of a singular, long-term, divinely mandated occultation. The temporary absence of a divine guide was already a well-established concept among early Muslims. Indeed, al-Saduq himself cites the prolonged absences of prophets such as Musa and Ayyub as precedents for ghaiba. Their periods of withdrawal could be understood as moments in which they served as hidden blessings for their communities. Within such a prophetic framework, describing God's blessing as apparent and hidden does not necessarily point to a unique eschatological Imam who would remain concealed for centuries. Additionally, the intellect itself has been described in several narrations as al-Hujjah al-Batina, the hidden proof. In that light, aql could just as plausibly be understood as the hidden Imam intended by the verse. In short, this terminology comfortably accommodates broader spiritual or theological meanings that do not require the entire framework of the later Twelver doctrine of occultation. Thus, even if the first portion of the narration is assumed authentic, it is too open-ended to function as decisive proof for the specific doctrine of the 12th Imam's prolonged ghaiba. In conclusion, and in our opinion, it is impossible to determine with a high amount of certainty as to which of the various possibilities presented is the actual truth. At the end of the day, and as we always say, Allah will not judge us by whether we reached absolute truth or not, but rather by the burhan, the evidence we bring to Him in support of our beliefs.